Welcome to FitBody Lifestyle, the show where we dive deep into the world of fitness, health, business, relationships, and the art of living a balanced life. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Greg, and we're here to give you the benefit of our experiences in the fitness and bodybuilding industry, the corporate world, running a business, personal development, and building healthy relationships.
Whether you're sweating it out in the gym, hustling in your business, or seeking balance in your everyday life, you're in the right place.
So lace up those sneakers, grab that water bottle, and let's get ready to transform our minds, our bodies, and our lives. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of FitBody Lifestyle with Greg and
Jamie.
Hey, today we are going to talk about a topic that is probably near and dear to us in the fitness industry, but it's also a topic that pervades our entire society, and it's body image. What is it? How do you maintain it? How do you manage it? How do you maintain a positive body image? And I know there's all this body positive movement that goes along with it, but we want to start today with a little quote. And the quote is from my favorite philosopher, who is Bruce Lee, which is, "Don't speak negatively about yourself, even as a joke. Your body doesn't know the difference. Words are energy and they cast spells. That's why it's called spelling. Change the way you speak about yourself and you can change your life." And I'm going to follow that one quote with another quote from Maya Angelou, which is, and I think most people have heard this one, but if you haven't, here it is. "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." And as I think about that particular quote and marry that with the Bruce Lee quote, it just really goes into this topic of how do you talk to yourself? There is so much input on our world in terms of how people are talking to you and at you. I don't know if everybody has been, I'll call it the victim of social media bullying, but that happens quite a bit. And we've had that happen with coaches. We've had that happen with athletes where people will question how they look. We have a competitor, and one of our coaches in particular, that's a mother, and she posted some pictures of herself with her baby, and a lot of people were attacking her for that, her physically and just the post and everything. So it's very easy to get into that negative self-image and that negative body image. And Jamie, why don't you kind of describe how it shows up a lot with your athletes and how it shows up with you individually as well?
Well, it's one of the reasons we decided to do this topic is it's definitely something that's constantly coming up, whether it be in our check-ins, whether we be with some of our athletes. And I actually was at an event this past weekend, and one of the athletes at the event was asking me about a particular thing that was on her mind about her body. And it reminded me of this because she's a beautiful young woman with a beautiful figure, and she was fixating on one little thing that she saw as a flaw, and that was affecting just how she looked at herself in total. So we had a wonderful conversation about it, and it just really made me think about how important of a topic this is and how much I really wanted to be able to talk about it. And there's nothing wrong with working to improve areas that you want to improve. And at the same time, I think it's so important that we also love ourselves just the way that we are. And you don't have to change or improve, and you could love yourself just the way you are. Or if you're a bodybuilder and you want to improve upon the physique that they're looking for on stage, then obviously, that's something you can work on. But quite honestly, for most of us, our best look isn't the stage look on,
Well, and that's kind of where we kick this off, right? Is that in our industry, in the fitness and bodybuilding industry, everything is about how you look. You're assessed, you're judged. I mean, you're judged. You're putting yourself on a stage to be judged on your physical appearance. So there is so much focus on that here, but it exists outside the world. I mean, turn on the news, turn on the television, watch social media. People are posting this image, that image. You never know exactly how much those images are retouched or fabricated or whatever. The AI, artificial intelligence overlay on this is now presenting people in images that are not really them at all. And the deep fake aspect of this, of the presentation of things that aren't really real. But it does shape and mold your psyche. It does shape and mold your image of yourself. So our topic is really, how do you deal with that? In our business in particular, I think one of the things that we wrestle with a lot with our competitors is, how do we manage how you look on stage, which we have often said and will always say that that's your least healthy. But that is what's celebrated. That's what's rewarded. That is what is judged versus how you look when you're not on the stage. And let's face it, when you're on the stage, you are fully glammed up with makeup and everything else. You're tanned. You are in a very small piece of clothing. Everybody is seeing everything that you have there. And yet when you're in the real world, you're not showing that.
And I don't like the least healthy thing.
Okay.
I like to say that you're not
Fair.
at your most healthy.
Okay.
Because, I mean, we employ as many health strategies as we possibly can to keep people really healthy. And the reason why, and I'll speak for you, but the reason why Greg's saying least healthy is just because really our bodies are not meant to be at that low percentage of body fat. But what ends up happening, and obviously we're doing this for a day to go up to be judged. But what's important, then is to, deal with the mental aspect of you've been working so hard to create this look in your mind sometimes, or in our athlete's mind sometimes, that look becomes the be all end all, and anything that doesn't look like that, they start beating themselves up about. So I'll have people go, oh, I'm bloated, I'm fat, I'm this, I'm that, and they're really not. So and it's not, and it just becomes one of those things is they're comparing what they look like in an improvement season mode where they should have more body fat to what they would look like on stage. So I think part of it is really being able to be real and honest with yourself about what is a healthy level of body fat. And that's a little different for everybody. Everybody's got their own set point. But I do think that in the bodybuilding world specifically, that's where it becomes an issue, is people are comparing what they look like to what they looked like, the day of show. And as you said, they've got a tan on. They are, we do all kinds of peaking strategies during their week into their show that we call peak week. We do a lot of strategies to create that specific look for stage. After that, then we want to slowly bring up body fat to a healthier level, and so that hormone health stays in a good place and that kind of thing. But I think the most difficult thing is where people start really beating themselves up, and that's what'll break my heart sometimes, is hear people talk negatively about themselves. I do think it's important to be able to share those kinds of things, with your coach, or with somebody close to you. And at the same time, the quote that you said is one of the things we want to talk about, which is be careful reinforcing those kinds of thoughts about yourself. And in particular, one of the things I talk to my ladies about is talking to their husbands, boyfriends, significant others, and constantly putting themselves down. Because, this is a person who thinks you're the most beautiful, wonderful, fabulous thing on the earth. So, the thing I always tell them is, why do you want to convince them otherwise?
Right. Right. Which is so important. Like, why, if you're going to talk negatively about yourself to yourself, that's one thing. If you're going to talk negatively about yourself to others, then it can absolutely shape other people and how they view you. And we talk a lot about the fitness world, and certainly that's our domain. But we both worked in the private sector as well, and you could see people doing it there as well, regardless of whether you're in the fitness industry. Listen, I was a trial attorney for years, and if you would see how a jury would react to people based on how they looked when they walked into a courtroom or took the witness stand. And you are, the reality is everybody is looking at you at some point. And if you are caught up in how they are viewing you, and you then personalize or internalize that will shape that will shape your confidence, that will shape how you project yourself to other people. Is that fair?
Oh, I absolutely agree with that. And, what do we like to say? Opinions are like assholes. Everybody's got one.
And some are bigger than others. Yeah.
People are always going to have their opinions. And I think what's important is to feel good in your own skin.
Right.
Whatever that looks like. Obviously, for us, we're a fitness podcast. We're all about health and fitness and taking good care of yourself. So focusing more on that, what you look like, shape, size, all of those things are going to depend on you. What are your goals? What are you working towards? How do you feel your best. And I think that's really important. And in this day and age, with social media, I love that you give the example of the courtroom, because that's something that's been around for a long time. But what's really new when you look at the scheme of society over history is this ability for people to either anonymously or not anonymously go on and say negative things.
Right.
And a lot of it, quite honestly, in my opinion, comes from a place of jealousy, maybe boredom, maybe, people's own insecurity, where they, sometimes will lash out at others on social media. So I think you have to be careful not to personalize those kinds of things.
And you reminded me of something, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you just reminded me of something that is a piece of our background that you and I share, is that when we were in high school, there was social media consisted of what people wrote in the school paper, or what in the specific example that we're talking about is what they would write year end in your yearbook. I don't even know, do they still do yearbook? I have no idea whether kids are
probably
still doing
digitally.
Probably a digital version. Well, I
showing our age.
I should have Googled that and say, do they still do yearbooks? And but yearbook was a keepsake, and you and I have both shared that aspect of our past, is that people, it's just to show, to demonstrate the power of words and the power that they can have over you if you allow them to. And that's our topic today. But we both remember things that, I'll just say it. Somebody wrote in my yearbook, "You're very weird." And okay, now today,
and somebody wrote in my yearbook to a nice but ugly girl, or something like that.
Yes, and we're in high school at the time of these writings, but and I'll be honest, that did shape me, and that did stick with me decades later. That I'm still thinking about that one excerpt from the yearbook. The point here is that words matter. And as Maya Angelou, describes that, people will remember how you made them feel. Well, oftentimes you're making them feel a certain way based on the words that you use relative to them. And then on top of that, we have the words that you use for yourself. How do you describe yourself? How would you describe how you look? How would you describe, we have people that have 7% body fat and describe themselves as fat. And that clearly is a negative image that they're putting into their psyche. And there's an aspect of this that we've talked about. And one of the things maybe we'll talk about a little bit later in another show is leadership training and some of the leadership training that we've been through. We have gone through a lot of leadership training with a company called Rapport Leadership International. Clearly, I had a lot of I don't know if it's clear, but I had a lot of leadership training in the military, mostly by experience. But one of the things that we get from Rapport is something called, and it's not unique to Rapport because they didn't come up with the science, and technically this is a pseudoscience, is NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. And basically it's the concept that the words that you use do matter. And I'll be completely upfront and tell you that this is a pseudoscience. They've not been able to replicate the studies that originally founded this, I think back in 1978, which really that's irrelevant. What is relevant here to our discussion is that words matter.
Yeah, absolutely. Words matter in both directions. Like, what are we talking about ourselves like? And to ourselves and to others. I feel like the more we, it's why journaling is so powerful.
Right.
Because the more we focus on something, what I always like to say, what you resist persists. So whatever we focus our energy on is what we're going to see showing up more in our lives. So if our energy is focused on what we don't like about ourselves, then that's what's going to keep showing up more in our lives. So I always encourage my athletes to focus on the things that they really love about themselves, focus on the things they're proud of in their lives, and express those things, whether it be to themselves through, what they're saying to themselves, a sticky on the mirror, journaling, or what they're saying to those people that they care about in their lives, and there's definitely a difference between bragging or being arrogant and just being proud of yourself and being, happy with who you are as a person.
Well, that would be confidence versus arrogance, right?
Absolutely. Okay. And so that's the thing, I really encourage people to think about that. And then also to think about what they're saying about other people, whether it be to them or behind their backs or on social media. Again, it's one of those things where when we're putting positivity out into the world, that's what's going to show up more for us in our own lives. And I've experienced that myself. I mean, we can all get into, gossipy mode and that kind of thing. And we've even created a word that we say within our team. If we
don't give that away, because then if people know, they'll know that. Okay.
But it is just one of those things where if we start kind of getting into that gossipy kind of mode,
Right.
like just kind of snapping right out of it. And, that's, we want to embrace the things that are going to make us, better versions of ourselves, which
Right.
is, that positive self-talk, that positive talk about other people. And, the more, I feel like the more that that's put out into the world, the more that it comes back. And listen, guys, if somebody's being negative or trolling you or putting, nasty things on your social media, guess what? You can block them. You can mute them. You can stop listening to them, seeing them, even if they're posting things on their own social media you're uncomfortable with. We all don't have to agree on things. We all don't have to, the kind of content or the kind of things other people are putting out. And it's just a matter of, turn it off. Listen to those people that uplift you, that make you feel great, that help you be a better version of yourself. And the rest of them, you don't even have to pay attention. And I've done that quite a bit.
That's
personally.
Right. Well, and you've got your circle, the people that you surround them with, is like your garden. And a garden doesn't just grow without tendering. You've got to take care of it. It's why, as we talk about the importance of our business, and something that we really want to stand up for is culture. Is what's the culture of your business? What's the culture of your marriage? What's the culture of your friendship, and of your friendships, I should say? And who are you surrounding yourself with, and what are you looking at, and what are you watching, and how are those things impacting you? And as we talk about tools to use and things to take away, you are at choice, and you have the ability to control what you digest, what you ingest, both physically and through your mouth and through your eyes and through your ears. You can choose those things. You can't completely insulate yourself. You can't. I don't know that that's possible. Unless you were to move to someplace that had, move to the great tundra, the frozen tundra of Alaska, maybe, and get completely off grid. There, you're in complete control of that. But if you're going to live in the world and you're going to be part of the world, there will always be some attacks, one way or the other. And by attacks, I simply mean some negativity around you, whether it's watching the news and seeing the negative stuff around that, or watching social media or whatever, having friends around you or people around you that are just negative. And you get to make that choice about whether you want to keep those people around or not.
Yeah, I love that you brought up culture, because one of the other things that brought to my mind is, I'm not suggesting that we're all about, flowers and rainbows and not being real.
Right.
So what I'm talking about is coming from a constructive, positive place.
Right.
So in some cases, and I'll speak to our relationship, because you talked about culture and relationship and marriage and things like that, is, that also holding each other accountable, which, sometimes those are hard conversations, whether that be with the person you love the most, like for me with you, or with other family members, with other friends, things like that, being willing to come from that place of, hey, maybe consider the way this might have come across to someone else, or maybe think about how you could have said that differently, because here's how it made me feel, those kinds of things. So I think there's a lot of people in today's society, because we are so reliant on technology and that separation between real heart-to-heart sorts of contact and communication, that people are afraid of conflict, and thus sometimes don't hold each other accountable, and maybe harbor resentments, and then those come out sideways, through other means. And it's something that I feel like I've gotten even more grounded in as I'm, watching, gosh, we all went through COVID and, felt very separated from everyone. We got used to using video chat instead of, talking in person. Like, there's all these things that have changed for us. And I think one of the things I've noticed is sometimes people are reluctant to really have those heart to heart or those face to face conversations or even phone conversations versus a text that could be misconstrued. So anyway, kind of coming back to my original point is I think it is important to have those people around you that are coming from a good, loving place and are also willing to tell you and tell you if something that you said or didn't come across the right way, and also be willing to, give you some feedback as to how that might be improved.
Yeah, and as we talk about our particular world, and I'm really, you always catalyze and a lot of thoughts in my head about this, and so we can pull back the curtain. I can sometimes be a little bit negative about how I talk about myself. That comes from a lot of childhood upbringing, and thankfully I have a woman who I'm married to that's sitting across from me right now that holds me accountable for that. And when you hear me talking negatively about myself, you hold me accountable to that. You tell me, stop it. I mean, it's the Cher in Moonstruck, right? Snap out of it, and that's what always kind of pulls me back to reality. And maybe the story I'm telling myself about myself is not the story I want to tell. Is not the story that is going to be uplifting or enriching or encouraging or positive. It's a story of negativity, and somewhere along the line, I convinced myself into that stinking thinking that was somehow propelling me forward. And in fact, what I can assure you is that it was pulling me down, because it introduced self-doubt, it introduced a lack of confidence, it introduced a lot of things in me personally that just are things that I'm still wrestling with today. But hey, if we're not working on something for improvement, then the alternative is, to me, then I'm 6 feet under. I always want to be working on something to improve myself. I think you're the same way.
I am the same way. And I've talked about this before on the podcast, and even initially, that I was bullied a lot growing up, and I, was kind of a weird looking kid. I had, the buck teeth and the crazy hair and the whole thing. And it's funny, I think about it now, and some of the things I was most insecure about, because having curly hair, I didn't know how to style it right and things like that. So I just looked super frizzy all the time. And now I love my curls, and it was a really funny, I don't know, kind of like confidence building.
Maybe,
yeah, like confidence building sort of process as I was learning to embrace that aspect of myself.
Well, since we're talking about your hair, there's something else that you're learning to embrace.
Yeah, I was going there. Right, I was going there. So, so just embracing that aspect of myself. And then, yes, like I've gone gray. If people haven't noticed, like, I'm letting my gray hair grow. And I think part of that for me is just that embracing who I am and where I am. And that doesn't mean I don't want to grow old gracefully. I absolutely do, and want to, take good care of myself, skincare, hair care, all those kinds of fun things. And at the same time, it's just, for me, it's just embracing an aspect of myself and getting older, and just allowing me to accept myself a little bit more. And, it's definitely been a work in progress, because when people say, those mean, hurtful, ugly things, man, they really stick. I mean,
yeah, they do.
What they say, you can hear 10 good things for every one negative thing. I mean,
you'll focus on that one negative thing.
Yeah,
right?
Our brains are just really tuned into focusing on that negative thing.
Right.
So, I do think it's a lifelong process of really working on how we're thinking about ourselves. And I mean, I'm certainly still working on it every day.
And that description you gave, by the way, of the focusing on hearing 10 things and one of them is negative, the focus on that one negative thing. And granted, that's not everybody. We're not talking about everybody is this way, but that's where the concepts of neuro-linguistic programming come in, is that you will focus on that one thing over the 9 positive things. And that's a lot of people. That's just a lot of people. I'm one of them.
Yeah. I think most people have experienced that at least once in their lives, where there's somebody says something and it just overrides the things that, other people have said different or said positive things. And, it's okay to feel good about yourself. It's okay to accept yourself. One of the great things about being a human being is we're not all the same. We have different strengths. We have different weaknesses. We have different, and that's really what makes things beautiful. And that's one thing I will say that I feel like has changed in a really good way, because I know growing up there was kind of like a blueprint of the person. If you didn't have this certain hair and this hair color and this certain kind of look or whatever, I feel like we've come into a time now where differences are more embraced.
Right.
Whereas when growing up, I felt like they weren't as embraced. You kind of had that,
like the curly hair thing, right?
Yeah, you kind of had that Barbie mentality.
And the truth is, there are studies, and there is some studies. In the sense that it's scientific study, yes, about how people are received and treated differently based on the color of their skin, based on their height, based on their gender, based on how they dress. I mean, these are not. This is not uncommon, and I think most people know about that. But we are not talking about that. We are talking about how you talk about yourself and how you envision yourself. Because at the end of the day, that stuff you may not be able to control, but the one thing you can control is how do you talk about yourself, and by we say how do you talk about yourself is how do you talk to yourself.
Right. Which, and kind of coming back to my point, that's where I was going. Like, there's something beautiful in every single person. So if we as individuals embrace those qualities about ourselves, and I think, also making sure, just like when we talk about fitness goals, we don't want to only focus on, if we're saying bodybuilding, only focus on the trophy. Like, no, we want to focus on, wow, I've improved, my training in the gym. I've improved, my compliance in terms of getting enough protein in each day. Like, there are other aspects of the fitness journey to look at as, milestones and things like that. And I think, looking at ourselves as a whole person rather than going, oh, I really don't like how my belly button looks, like, which is actually a real thing for me. I mean, it sounds silly, but it's, after having kids, like, my belly button looks different. So it's not my favorite part of myself, so I wanted just being totally real. Like, I know, and it sounds like such a funny thing to say. And yet I do think that a lot of us do have those things that, it's rather than just focusing on this one little part of myself, focusing on other aspects, whether it be, I'm a kind person, I care about people, I love my curly hair, whatever those things are, we get to pick what aspects of ourselves that we're going to focus our time and energy and attention to. Right.
And I would call that, I'll introduce a little concept of shooting that I like to shoot. So, and I hope that I'm not offending anybody by telling that, but if I am, then that's your choice to be offended. But when you're shooting at something, you have a rear sight, a front sight, and the target. And you can hear different people talk, but what I would tell you is that your eye can only focus on one of those things at a time. So the way that I was taught was to focus on the front sight, and that's going to make your rear sight a little bit blurry and the target a little bit blurry. So hence the mindset of front sight focus. What am I going to focus on? That's what's going to receive my attention. And if I'm focused on what I don't have, then that will show up. If I focus on what I do have, for example, I don't like my nose. I have never liked my nose. I'm Italian, and I always felt like, okay, I got a big nose. But usually what I find is I'm the only one who thinks that. Most everybody else says, no, it's fine. But that's what I focus on. And so for me personally, when I'm focusing on that aspect of myself and I catch myself doing it, I remind myself of the other story, of the story that's not that I have a big nose. It's that I have a nose that's proportionate to my face.
I was going to say, well, you would look really funny with this little small nose.
But that's in somewhere I got the story that's and I'm sure it comes out of my childhood. I'm not sure. I know it comes out of my childhood. Was somebody giving me a dig like that, and I was just in a vulnerable moment, and it stuck with me. So as we talk about the action items here or the takeaways here, it's just important to recognize what are those things that I don't like about myself, and how do I then reshape my thinking around those things to embrace and to get into that level of acceptance. And I mean, acceptance is one thing. I really think that next level is embracing it. Not just okay, I'm this way and I'm accepting it. It's I'm this way, and you know what? I'm good with that. I'm going to embrace that and embody that. That's that part that I think a lot of people, myself included, struggle with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely can say I'm one of those people as well. And pointing out some of the things that I found myself focusing on in the past, and then going beyond that. And I know I go to this place of gratitude frequently, because I feel like that is a place where when I see myself going into that negative types of thinking, stinking thinking, or being critical of myself or others, is really to go to that place of gratitude. I'm grateful that I'm able to do things that I love,
Right.
That this body has served me so well, and whether it be to train or to, get to go and, run
Use your body.
Yeah, just
Use your body.
do so many things, both physically, mentally, all of those things. So just going back to that place of gratitude, focusing on what I do have instead of
Right, what you don't.
what I wish was different,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
And as we talk about, we talked a second ago about confidence versus arrogance, and it's so funny how we see that in our world a lot. People who will take the stage, some of whom are overly confident to the point of being arrogant, and that shows in how they present to the judges. And so we're bringing everybody into this world, in this contest world. I think most people have seen Miss America, that pageant. Our world is not much different than that, in the sense that you are taking the stage and your whatever the posing suit is that you're going to wear, and a group of people are judging, assessing your physique based on criteria that's established by whatever is the sanctioning body. So that, that's not going to be everybody's world every day, but if you then think about walking into a boardroom or walking into a meeting room where other people are going to greet you, is it really that much different? Because you know that when you walk in for the first time, people are going to be judging you. And I say that with the recognition that that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a human response. It's very deeply rooted in our brain to make that assessment when somebody walks in the room. Are they a threat? Are they not a threat? What do they look like? What do they not look like? Do I find them attractive? Do I not find them attractive? Do I like their clothing? Do I not like their clothing? This is just something that your brain does, sometimes unconsciously. Hence, we get into maybe another topic another time of unconscious bias. But we all have those biases, and that's how the brain works. So in this space, as we talk, we've seen people get on stage that are very confident, and we've seen people get on stage that are very arrogant, and we've seen people get on stage that are neither, where they are thinking about that aspect of their body that they don't like, or thinking about that oh, my shoulders aren't big enough, or my glutes aren't round enough, or something. And what happens when we see that?
You can see it.
Yeah.
I mean, you literally can see it on the person's face. And I've talked to the judges before, and, they'll even say, I know when I see somebody standing off waiting their turn to walk on, I know whether or not they believe they're on or not, because the energy is there, the look on their face, just, how people, when they're focusing on what they feel like they don't have, almost look apologetic to be there. I'm sorry for wasting your time with my presentation.
We've had athletes say that to us.
Yes. And so, and like you said, that bleeds into every part of life. If I'm going to go stand up at the podium and give a presentation on something, if I walk up there looking apologetic and looking like I don't know if I should be here, or I know what I'm talking about, then are people going to listen? Are they going to believe what I have to say? Are they going to be interested in what I have to say if I'm not even interested in what I have to say? So it's really interesting how that happens. And so really controlling what's going on with in our minds. And I tell the athletes this a lot of times, that when I would go on stage, in order to control what was going on in my mind, I would purposefully have dialogue going on. That was what I wanted to show in my energy and my facial expressions and things like that. I would purposefully control the thoughts that were going on, because once that adrenaline kicks in and you step out in there, and anybody who's done public speaking or who's done any kind of performance, whether it's a play or a bodybuilding show or a pageant or whatever, knows that feeling. And you step out in front of all these eyes and the bright lights and everything else, it's very easy to slip into letting the mind take you where it wants to go. So that's where locking in and taking control. And that's really what we're talking about, though, is not just in that situation taking control of what's going on in our minds and what we're conveying to others, but also even when we're alone. So all the time really working on paying attention to and not scolding ourselves or being
Right.
mad at ourselves when those thoughts come in, because it's totally natural and normal. And I think it's just important then to evaluate when I start thinking something about myself, is that true? Because it might be. Maybe it's something I need to work on. Maybe I said something and it came across ugly or nasty or whatever, and I do have that conversation with myself sometimes too. I was like, wow, I didn't like how that came across. That wasn't how I intended and how I meant to. How can I do better? So it's really just a matter of, like, rather than me going, oh, that's it, you're bad, you suck, whatever, letting my mind going that direction, instead going, okay, was there something I could have done better? Is there some way that I can improve upon whatever it is that I'm not happy with in that moment? And then start shifting into a more positive way of thinking about myself and how I want to implement, change and continue to improve. And, I know you and I talk a lot about that perfectionist sort of mentality. And that's definitely been an issue with me a lot in my life. And I have to keep an eye on it because there is no such thing as perfect. So when we expect ourselves to be perfect, we're just always going to fail ourselves, so giving ourselves grace and realizing that we're all human, that we're all going to, do things that maybe we're not super proud of or are not ideal. So then can we at that point, forgive ourselves or, come to terms with it and whatever we need to, and then start working on how do we continue to improve. So I know we're talking about body image, but I think all these things tie together.
They do. And I can tell that we kind of scratched the surface on a topic that we're going to need to cover a little bit more in a second episode. So for today, let's sign off and let's just give people the takeaway that your self-image is something that you can control. And how you talk to yourself and how you talk about yourself is the way to control that. So be mindful of that. And as we say today, be good to yourself, be good to each other, and be safe.
Thank you for tuning in to FitBody Lifestyle. We hope today's episode has left you feeling motivated and equipped to tackle your fitness goals, business challenges, and the daily dance of life. Remember to value progress over perfection. Life's tough enough alone. Find the chosen family around you to help you along the way.
If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite streaming platform. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at FitBodyFusion.